Consumer demand for mental health and wellness services has skyrocketed, and as a consumer, finding the right services at the right time can feel like navigating a maze. To better inform consumers in our ever-evolving world, Keel aims to provide transparent and unbiased guidance in the mental health and wellness marketplace. Keel's mission is to power access to mental health and wellness for everyone, everywhere. On this week's episode, we speak with Keel founder Reed Langridge on his past career experiences, how they've helped him launch his own company, and his goals for Keel. Plus, he'll share some applicable tips and tricks for managing his own mental health while juggling different tasks, which is something I'm sure we can all benefit from. I'm Victoria Principato, and this is Yuptown. We are starting. 3, 2, 1, action. Reed, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Yuptown.
Thank you so much for having me.
So to kind of start things off, we always like to start with a little introduction. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about yourself and tell our listeners about who you are. Who is Reed Langridge?
Sure thing. Well, let me start from the beginning then. I'm from Sydney, Australia. I've got an older brother who currently lives with his wife in Dubai, and an older sister who lives in Sydney with her husband and 2 kids. Growing up, I had a pretty typical childhood in Australia, lots of sports and outdoors and that sort of thing.
Are there kangaroos everywhere, like us Americans think?
I'm going to say yes to that, just to keep that alive. So growing up, my family always had a really solid work ethic, especially my mom, who could make a Manhattan law firm look lazy. Dad always wanted us to be someone, think bigger and differently. And then if we fast forward to after high school, I studied a double bachelor's degree in economics and law. It's a super long course. And I paid my way through that, working at a bar and a community legal center, where we'd work with all sorts of marginalized people in the community, like refugees, victims of domestic violence, elderly people. And that experience was, exactly as you can imagine, stacks of manila folders everywhere, attorneys and translators rushing in and out of meeting rooms. And there were just so many great lessons, now that I'm thinking about it, around accountability and resiliency, advocating for change and not taking no for an answer. And, throughout those years, I really survived on instant noodles. And that meant that I could save and travel between semesters, and got to backpack through parts of Asia, the Pacific Islands, South America, which really gave me a taste for travel. And then towards the end of my student life, I joined one of the big law firms in Australia and got my first taste of corporate life, wearing a suit every day, hierarchy, tying a bow tie, which is actually ridiculously hard to do. And then, realized that while I loved studying law, I wasn't as passionate about a career in it. I respected the partners at the firm a lot, but I just couldn't see myself in their shoes. For one thing, I'm nowhere near smart enough. And secondly, I couldn't see myself sacrificing what they did for the firm and not one day regretting it. I remember, sitting at the back of the courtroom one day, and one of the partners I work for asked me, so what do you want to work on next? The trial was coming to an end. And, I said, I don't really know. I just know that I need to try different things. And
I do just want to stop you there for a second, Reed, because I think that's such an important point. You talk a lot about all these different skill sets that you've gathered through different experiences. And I know sometimes when you're in the middle of that, in the throes of that, it can feel pointless and stagnant. If you're in a position that isn't clicking for you, it can feel like you're wasting your time almost. But I'm really happy to hear you say that those skill sets that you've built in those previous roles are ones that, are still applicable. You're still kind of gathering them into your toolbox, from, building resiliency to learning to tie a bow tie.
Totally. I'm a firm believer that if you throw yourself into each experience and treat each experience as a learning experience, you're going to walk away with something that's going to benefit you down the road, from, whether it's a technical skill or a non-technical skill. I think there was a commencement speech by Steve Jobs that really nailed this point, where um, he had sort of bounced around different courses at college, including a calligraphy course. And it wasn't until, Apple were designing the keyboard that, he relied on those skills. But, that was just this random data point from many, many years before that contributed to, something that has, we all have in front of us, our laptops and our iPhones. So I really like that point.
Wow, I like that a lot too. That's a really good fun fact.
Yeah, I think his line is, it's really easy to connect the dots in hindsight. At the
Yes.
time, it might feel random, but down the road, you see that, that step led to the next step, which led to the next one. And then I think the other element to that is, having people in your life, whether it's, official mentors or otherwise, that can help you see different opportunities and connect those dots where you may not be able to do yourself, or it may take longer for you to do yourself.
Exactly.
And that's
and it's
what
that gathering process too. And I think, at least I felt this way. I felt so much pressure to have it all figured out as soon as I graduated. But when you're just kind of thrown into those positions, I feel like it's sometimes important to remind yourself it's not forever. And, there's something always to be learned.
Totally. And I wish this podcast existed when I was going through this. But yeah, when I remember having a conversation with the partner on this exact point, and he helped me to sort of weigh up different opportunities in and outside of law, weigh up the pros and cons, and to really rehash that point. The mentorship is just such an important piece of the puzzle, in addition to gathering those data points.
Right. So to kind of get back to then, that's a perfect segue back into your career. So you were deciding what to do next after exiting corporate law. What was that like for you? And where did you go next?
So I knew that I wanted to do something with impact, like we all do. I knew I wanted to work really closely with people. I knew I didn't want to just sort of like drop in and out of, finite projects. I really like the idea of joining something and sinking my teeth in over the long term. I think real relationships are built not just over a short period of time, but, each morning you show up, you say good morning, you ask about the weekend. And when you build relationships like that, you can really rely on one another and do far more than you could otherwise. So I liked that model of going in deep into an organization. And I ended up picking a high growth client of the firm, looking to do exactly that. And I just got hooked on helping the company to scale and adapt and disrupt. And a lot of the skills from the community legal center became useful, around accountability and resiliency. And when I built up enough experience, in that high growth startup, working in all sorts of things, I wanted to test myself in bigger and faster cities. And here we are in New York City, the biggest, fastest city of them all.
Yeah, it doesn't get faster than this.
It does not.
Tell us what you're working on now. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Keel is and what it does?
For sure. So I'll start with our mission. And our mission is to power access to mental health and wellness for everyone, everywhere. Because by optimizing access, more people will get the right help at the right time and ultimately live better lives. And I got the idea when someone near and dear to me was going through a rough patch during COVID, and had no way to easily compare the different types of therapy and wellness services available to them in terms of prices or features, reviews, insurance coverage. So it works really similar to Expedia for travel, or Credit Karma, or NerdWallet for personal finance, if anyone's familiar with those, in that it matches you to services with no strings attached. So let's say you're looking for a therapist service for yourself or a friend, a family member. You can visit mykeel.com and really easily compare price, features, reviews, insurance coverage across all sorts of services like BetterHelp, Talkspace, OnlineTherapy.com, Brightside, Bloom, Ayana Therapy, Cerebral, ZenCare. I mean, the list just goes on and on. And rather than investigating each individually, I help people to compare and make an informed decision that's best for them. But part of our philosophy at Keel is that mental health is more than just therapy. It's a combination of things that's different for all of us and changes throughout our life.
Mm.
So it was important for us to build a platform in a way that allowed users to have visibility into the full range of services available. So we have the ability to compare therapy services, but let's say you're looking for a new meditation service instead to help with anxiety or improve sleep. On Keel, you can do exactly what I described for therapy. You can compare across waking up or headspace, 10% happier, breath work, which is my personal favorite at the moment, aura, calm, and many, many more. Lastly, if you have no idea where to start, which many of us sort of start this journey not knowing where to start, Keel has a really easy to follow questionnaire that can generate your options for you. That's free, and again, no strings attached.
Wow. I think this is such a powerful tool because it is such a barrier to entry already. Someone who is seeking help has nowhere to turn. Trying to find the right help, you want it to be easy and accessible. And I do think we have more to talk about in terms of accessibility. But maybe you could tell us what does Keel mean? What does the name Keel mean?
Yeah,
And maybe how that plays into your mission.
Yeah, so I do get this question from time to time. So if you've ever seen, a sailing boat or a ship out of water, there's this long piece of wood or steel that runs lengthwise along, the base or the bottom of it, and it serves a couple of purposes. So the first thing is it keeps the ship upright or vertical in the water, and when it's moving, it keeps it traveling on course. So, like the keel of a ship, we generally don't see our mental health, but it keeps us upright, keeps us moving towards our goals, or keeps us on an even keel, which is a phrase that's commonly thrown around. So I thought Keel was a nice name in that way.
Wow, I love that. I think that's so clever. I never knew that about ships, so thank you for sharing that fun fact as well. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about, the main problem that Keel addresses. I know we talked a little bit about access and visibility into the mental health marketplace and the wellness marketplace. So maybe you could tell us, how Keel addresses those issues.
Yeah, so by powering access to mental health and wellness, Keel solves what's called the matching problem. And what I mean by that is, on the one hand, you've got millions of everyday people in need of mental health and wellness services. And then on the other hand, there are hundreds of services backed by science at different price points with different features and specialities. And then in the middle, there's this really fragmented marketplace that's really difficult to and stressful to navigate, and requires you to fill out questionnaires, put in banking information, there are registration forms. Sometimes you need to speak with a sales representative. There's fine print to read. There are reviews to plow through, even if those reviews are available, just to be able to find the basic information about each of these services. And nobody wants to go through that at the best of times, especially when they're dealing with an issue.
Exactly.
So Keel, exactly. So Keel empowers people to understand their options in a really easy and informed way, so that they can match with the right service for them at that point in time and solve that matching problem.
I think that's incredible. Again, like it does, address such a need. And I know you mentioned a little bit earlier, you were inspired by someone you cared about, going through something difficult and having a really hard time finding help. So maybe you could tell me a little bit more about, what drove you to start Keel and what continues to motivate you today.
For sure. Well, the first point I'd make is, mental health is just so important. It is a foundational need for all
And
of us.
it's ongoing too. I like the way you kind of mentioned that it's not something one quick fix and done. Mental health should be considered a practice, not a quick fix band-aid situation. Would you agree?
I would agree, and I would add another layer to that as well, in that it's a practice for a particular environment And, at the environment that we're in just continues to evolve. So
Hmm.
you look at the impact of social media on mental health, for instance, um, our practice needs to continually evolve to be able to handle, the mental health impacts associated with that. So in that way, it is this continually evolving status of
Exponentially evolving if it's following the rate of social media growth.
exactly. So it's a really important topic. It's foundational for us all, and I think there's an increased awareness of that. And when we are our best selves, we're better listeners, we're more collaborative, we're more forward-looking,
We
we're
have
better
to fill our own cups to be able to serve others.
Love that. That's a great phrase. And everybody wins, right? When our own cups are full, everybody wins.
Yes,
So when
exactly.
I started investigating this space, I was really surprised at just how fragmented the market is and how hard it is to discover and compare services. But it doesn't just stop there. There are really significant inequities in today's system.
Hmm.
So today, research shows that about 40% of people that meet the diagnosable criteria of a mental health condition have access to mental health care. So that leaves the majority. It leaves 60% of people that need care without it. And as you might guess, the 60% without care consists of people at risk, people of color, sexual and gender minorities, immigrants, those with low socioeconomic status.
Mm.
Um, and these people are silently suffering. And what this has created is a negative spiral where mental health service providers increasingly cater to the 40% to the further exclusion of those at risk. And this manifests itself in all sorts of ways, whether it's product features or marketing or pricing tactics that just don't relate as easily to everybody in need. So given how important mental health is to all of us, the fact that the marketplace is just so highly fragmented with massive access challenges and this spiraling inequality in today's system, why wouldn't I want to start Keel and do what I can to move the needle, especially for those that are at risk?
That's fantastic. And I think that does play into our earlier point of past experiences driving your future motivations. I think it sounds like you had some really interesting experiences at the community law center that you worked in. And it sounds like that awareness that you've developed there has continued to shape your mission. So I think that's really cool to kind of connect those dots in that way. And I guess kind of to circle a little bit back on your past experiences of all of the talents that you've developed, what would you say some skill sets that you have developed that have been most impactful as you've kind of gone on to start your own venture?
Yeah, I don't know about talents. Yeah, so starting a company is a lot of work. No matter who you are, there's going to be a steep learning curve. And everybody says that, but what does that actually mean? And from my experience, from a technical standpoint, there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of planning, financial modeling, creative thinking, coding that you may or may not know how to do. And then from a non-technical perspective, there's a lot of peaks and valleys, from total confidence in your game plan to totally second guessing everything. But if you're able to keep perspective and maintain a growth mindset, obstacles become more like learning opportunities, which can absorb some of the impact from frustrations when they inevitably come up. All that said, I think the most valuable and transferable skill set for me would be project management.
Mm-hmm.
Project management has helped me stay organized and break big pieces of work into manageable daily tasks. No matter what the goal is, whether it's starting a company or running a marathon, if it's ambitious, it's going to require a lot of different pieces coming together.
Mm-hmm.
And project management gives you the tools and frameworks to set goals, break those goals into work streams and milestones, assign tasks, even if it means assigning tasks to yourself, manage people. So I think anyone looking to start a company or run a marathon, I think project management is a really great set of tools and frameworks to have. And if they don't have that, then I don't think it means they're going to not be successful. But I think it's going to take more time and it's going to take more stress to get there.
And it certainly helps. And I also really appreciate you giving our listeners and myself some really tangible ways to kind of develop our own skill sets. So could you maybe talk a little bit more about what you mean by project management? Are there certain certifications or resources that, you know, we can go to?
For sure. So I would encourage anyone interested in exploring this space more to check out basic project management concepts and frameworks just on YouTube. You know, start with the free stuff. If you see value in that and you feel that they are gaps in your own sort of workflow and thought process, then you may want to take it one step further and check out a couple of certificates. Like the ones that I'm familiar with is, first of all, Prince 2 Foundation and Practitioner. It costs about $1,600. It takes less than a year to get. And what's great about that certification is that you don't have to have any project management experience to qualify and start the certificate. But also, if you do have some experience already, that's great. You know, you can hit the ground running with that certificate. There's a more advanced certificate called PMP, or Project Management Professional. It's a bit more advanced, it's a bit more expensive.
And I think it requires a bit more maintenance, right?
It does, yeah. So you've got to maintain that certificate on an ongoing basis. So it really comes down to, you know, each person's individual preferences and, you know, what they're looking to get out of it. But yeah, I would propose project management skills as, you know, really obtainable, whether it's informally and free on YouTube and just sort of ticking the box and moving on, or going that extra step and getting a formal certification. It's going to help in a lot of ways.
Right. And I think very widely applicable too, no matter what you're trying to develop. So I appreciate that that piece. So Reed, thank you so much for sharing the skill sets that you've built. We talked a little bit about project management. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you manage your own mental health, juggling all these different tasks and working on so many different projects?
Yeah, for sure. So I keep it simple with 4 principles. You know, the first of the 4, I would say, is to stay organized. You know, stay super, super organized. Loose ends can mean sleepless nights. It can mean worry. It can mean missed opportunities. I use Google Calendar to manage multiple schedules and a really simple running Google Doc to plan meetings, track tasks, and make sure I'm prioritizing and reprioritizing regularly throughout the day. And I would encourage people to try different organizational systems and find the one that works for them. Like, everybody's different. And sometimes it's nice to try one thing for 6 months. And then if it's not working, you know, try something else and try something else. I've had multiple systems over time. And I think, you know, from my perspective, that's okay. It's just staying in tune with what you want and what's working. The second principle is sweat. It's important to be active. You know, our physical health and mental health is very much intertwined. I would suggest, you know, working out outside, preferably with others. And it doesn't
The community sweat, there's nothing like it.
For sure. I think there's an extra sort of component there when you're working out with other people and you push yourself harder, you push each other harder. And yeah, there is something in that. I'm sure there's some research out there on
we could do a whole episode on that. I would love to do a follow-up episode. So just put a pin in that.
Yeah, we're doing that next. You know, you don't have to work out for long, you know, particularly if you're not that type of person. But it does need to be regular, you know, and set up your schedule in a way that works for you. You know, if you're a morning person, do mornings. If you're an evening person, do evenings. It's, you know, as simple as that. That's the only way to make it stick and feel more like a release and less like a chore. The third thing I'd say is calories. You know, consume good calories. Our gut health and mental health is also very much intertwined. And this, I must say, I don't do a good job of till I'm really run down. But, you know, when I am burnt out, I think, you know, it's really important to eat well. For me, that normally means a lot of vegetables. I love coconut water. It makes me feel healthy, energized, and it just brings me back to life. And then I'd say the last of the four would be affection. When things are really busy, you're feeling a bit worn out, be sure to reach out to your family, your friends, your partner. When you're pushing your limit, you're outside of your comfort zone, trying to create something that has never been done before, you're likely not going to have the regular checkpoints where things are moving along nicely. There's no guidebook for your specific situation. And that can't be understated, right? Like, that's hard, especially if you're comparing the experience to school or a regular job where you have these, grading systems, or you have these performance reviews that sort of keep you abreast of how you're tracking. As an
Right.
entrepreneur, it's really easy to get inside your head. And, sometimes a bit of support or affection can give you that perspective of what really matters, and, boost you up and, get back into it. So if you can create a schedule that incorporates, one or more of those four principles, I think you're in a pretty good position to, avoid burnout, or at least push it back longer than it ordinarily would come up. And you'll be focusing on the right things. You'll have that healthy perspective. So I would recommend those four principles.
I love that. And I think you touched on so many different points. And again, can we do another episode that is purely about maintaining your own mental health? I think that'll be a follow-up for me.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
That would be awesome. What are some goals and milestones for you with Keel?
So the goals for Keel at the moment, being still early stage, is really three things. Firstly, I want to make sure we're focused on making mykeel.com as helpful and impactful as possible to everyone, especially those at risk that we mentioned before. And what that means is speaking with as many users as possible and gathering actionable feedback, implementing those improvements, and just continually to make that as effective as possible. In addition to that, I want to continue building a really strong team and advisory panel of talented technologists and mental health experts. And then thirdly, set solid business foundations. I've worked with businesses around the world, and I recognize the importance of having a really robust business plan, really understanding what progress means at that stage of the growth curve, and pivoting where necessary. And then, establishing that mission-based culture, which is also really important. Big picture in terms of goals, it's to be the #1 resource for people looking to access mental health and wellness services and help millions of people along the way.
Well, Reed, we so appreciate that. And I know that, the millions of users someday will too. So I'm really excited to have had the opportunity to speak with you. This has been such a great conversation.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you too.
Thank you so much.